Mech Pilots, online. BattleTech Manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech Podcast.
MechWarriors. We've arrived at episode 14, also known as episode 1, season 2 of BungleTech. And today's episode is going to be starting out the new year right. In this episode, we are joined by the voice of BattleTech, as defined by Tren Sparks, Tex, as we chat about what it is that makes Tex mechs. That's a bad pun. I really mean what makes Tex tick. We spend some time sharing our BattleTech New Year's resolutions, get a little weird in our battlefield outcome report, discuss an engine and a walking mistake, and read a sample of the short story Flying Kites by Daniel Isberner. Let's start this new year out right, MechWarriors. Hop into the hot seat and get ready for a bumpy ride.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary proclamation. Initiating.
Before we start today's episode, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our newest patron, MechWarrior Caleb Edward. Thank you for joining us on our bungling adventure, soldier. Your support, and the support of all our patrons, honors us. For all other listeners interested in the bespoke prizes and participation opportunities available to our patrons, check out our page linked in our show description. Also, I wanted to give a quick shout out regarding the BattleTech Trading Card Game Spring League, facilitated by Renegade HPG, starting on March 1st. I've mentioned it before, but in the 90s, BattleTech had a card game that frankly was quite solid. Travis and his BattleTech TCG community have been bringing life back to the game, including redesigning some aged mechanics that didn't play out, creating new cards with new artwork that is sick, and facilitating both casual and competitive play with prizes involved. If you like card games and you like BattleTech, I really recommend you check out his community. It's free to get involved in the casual elements. I have linked his Facebook group in the description of the podcast. Check it out if that flames your infantry.
Primary objective. Podcast topic segment. Initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 1, season 2 of BungleTech. I'm really excited for today's episode. And of course, I am joined today by the sophisticated, the beautiful, the sensual Michael. Say hello, Michael.
Hello, Michael. That's a callback to the very first episode.
Our fans will get it. I'm also super excited to be joined by another guest today, the legendary Tex. Welcome, Tex. Thank you for being here.
I wouldn't say legend. Let's just say perpetual accident. I think that's more honest. Thank you, though. Thank you for the warm welcome.
So, Tex, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. Obviously, so many people associate you and BattleTech. Most people, I think, when they discover BattleTech, content creators, you're probably one of the biggest names that comes up there. And I know you're not necessarily, you don't want to be on that stage, but that's where you are, buddy. They're pointing fingers, being like, ooh, Tex, ooh, Tex.
I like to say that I got lucky. I feel very fortunate and blessed, however you wish to describe that. I've never wanted to make a pillar for myself, but a broader stage for others. And I feel lucky in many ways that people say, oh, Tex is the XYZ of BattleTech, whatever comparison they wish to make. But I'm just a voice in the choir, and I feel fortunate to be heard at all. And so I appreciate that.
I know there's been a few interviews already done with you, Tex. I know you were on Renegade HPG, which is a podcast that I love, and I know you talked to Sarna as well. I really want to know more about you, to be 100% honest. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to ask questions. We're going to deep dive but I really want to honor those other producers or those other creators, Sarna and Renegade HPG in particular. So I'm going to be referencing some stuff from the interviews. Looking back at your BattleTech history, as I understand it, you discovered BattleTech because you were actually interested in 40K. You came to a game store, you were introduced to it by some lovely BattleTech people who lent you some miniatures and stuff like that and got you into the game. But I'm really curious about a little bit deeper, a little bit more psychological. Not how did you discover it, but why did you discover it? What pulled you towards it? What philosophical seed in your brain made you come to BattleTech and maintain that interest? I'm really curious.
Well, what's kind of weird is one, the simple answer is the one I think most of us vibe with. I love stompy fucking robots, right? And I think we all do. Like, you don't like BattleTech unless you love stompy robots. That's why I play BattleTech. I enjoy stompy robots. In terms of what drew me in continually into BattleTech was the way in which the world is constructed, the way in which the world is built is realistic in many ways. You find heroes that, despite possessing great virtues, also possess at the same time tremendous flaws. You find nations that, despite having all of the claim to greatness, are plagued with incompetence and setbacks. You have a Game of Thrones in space with giant fucking robots, and it's really cool. I like all of those aspects. One of the things that I find that draws me in now, because as you get older, your tastes refine, but when it comes down to a setting, you have to love different parts of it at different ages. When you're young, it's the stompy robots. When you're in your younger years, it's the depth of character, perhaps. As an older man, I find a lot of what draws me in is the obvious comparisons to the modern military-industrial complex. And as someone who's worked in that field for a time, I find that it's really amusing to look at some of the little pieces they've seeded in the universe, and I go, yeah, that's real. That's real. That happens. Yep, that's very real. And it's kind of funny because these are lenses that I can use then to explore things in a new way. And I feel blessed to have that experience.
That's actually sort of one of the pieces of lore that I connect with the most is I'm sort of a very technology oriented person. So I love reading like the history of some particular model of a battle mech and being like, oh yeah, you know, its development was plagued by cost overruns and setbacks, and that's why they compromised this thing, and that's why this part sucks. I really like that sort of writing, even if it produces something that we'll never see play on the tabletop. I really love that element of the lore, that it is a flawed universe that's sort of flawed in a lot of very familiar ways.
Well, it gives character. Defects give character. As I'm fond of saying to my fan base, you don't sound like I do if all went well. But thing is when you look at anything that's built, if you look at noble, bright universes like Star Trek, even Star Trek had a World War III and a nuclear war. You need to have a bit of darkness and a bit of fucked up background to make things realistic.
Mhm.
And I find that BattleTech does that well. You find people who have really good ideas that are also incredibly limited or competent or incompetent. And you find so many wonderful mistakes that people make that are believable because you've seen real people make real mistakes in real procurement programs that mirror this.
Yeah, I think that anyone who has that experience, being a PM, a BA, whatever, if you've worked in that space, you can really understand how project scope messes out quality and how you very rarely have a perfect outcome. And when things come together to really create these perfect things, it's always a little bit of a miracle. There's lots on your side. There's luck. There's, so many things have to line up. It's so easy for things to go wrong. That's something that I think you really see in the BattleTech universe. Like, I connect to it in a similar fashion. To me, it's gritty and it's achievable. To me, it's It feels so realistic. I see a universe that I could actually imagine humanity evolving into, for better and for worse.
And you mentioned Warhammer 40K. Do you get that same sort of feel? Like, obviously, that's a very flawed universe as well, but to me, it feels really different from the BattleTech verse.
Warhammer 40K is a rule of cool universe, as I like to call it. It doesn't need to necessarily make sense. It's rule of cool. Bolters are cool. Are they sane choices for massive armaments and gunsmithing programs and weapons creation? Absolutely not. No army in the world is going to say, please give me soldiers that are taller and wider and easier to hit with things. No military in the world says, give me vehicles that have slab sides on them and have rivets. Like, nobody says that, but it's rule of cool. And so you go, oh, it's comic book logic. Of course, you have your heroes and your villains, and you have all of these shades of gray. I enjoy parts of 40K, not all of it. I enjoy parts of BattleTech, not all of it. I enjoy parts of Star Trek, not all of it. And that's what's great about fandoms, is you can slice what you like and you can like whatever you enjoy. And there's no sin in that. I have friends of mine who only watch original series Star Trek. That is all that turns their gears. And they swear off anything post DS9. I know friends of mine who came in with the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, and they're a lot more receptive to the new Star Treks, and they really don't get the older stuff. And that's
Mhm.
fine too, because we can have discussions about Star Trek, which we all enjoy in different ways.
We know you love BattleTech. We know you love 40K. But what else floats your boat, Tex? Let's get deep. What else do you like?
Well, I like parts of BattleTech. I'm not a huge fan of the Jihad or Dark Age eras, but I was there when Clicky Tech came in and kind of drove a lot of people out of the game. I like parts of 40K. I like parts of Star Trek. I like a lot of Star Trek. I like parts of Star Wars. In terms of other fandoms, I was really, really appreciative of Halo for a long time until that kind of went
Mhm.
off the deep end. That was a fun setting. Ian Banks' The Culture, another great series. I'm a huge fan of Traveler. That is probably my favorite sci-fi setting. And it has a wonderful, wonderful community as well. I'm a sci-fi nerd. If you have, even from very low end sci-fi, in terms of, the harder edge of sci-fi, I love The Expanse. I love Traveler 2300. I am a big fan as well of the space opera sorts of settings like Star Wars, where you have ridiculous things like P-51 style dogfights in space. I mean, why would you? But it's cool. You can't hate space dogfights and doing the trench run on the Death Star. That's cool, and probably because of John Williams' soundtrack. But I like elements and pieces of some of these things, and not all of it. There's always going to be parts of universes where you just go, that's stupid. Or I don't think that that's appealing to me, or whatever your limited ability to make peace with some of the egregious problems with it are. I like, for in 40K, for instance, I wrote a RPG and ran it called the Magistratum Mundanus, which is a slice of life story where all of my characters, all of my friends playing in the game got to play as basically beat cops in the 40K universe, not the Arbites, not the Judge Dredd guys,
Mhm.
the average police officers. And it was just a very low end slice of the universe, and it was very much like Terry Gilliam's
Mhm.
Brazil. I find that very enjoyable. When everyone is the giant 8 or 10 foot tall guy with a sword that's made out of collapsed diamond made in the heart of a dying star or whatever. Yeah, not
Mhm.
interesting to me. For the same reason I don't like superheroes all that much. When you have something that is a power fantasy, I generally just kind of shrug at it. I like characters to have real challenges. And so that's another thing that brings me back to
Mhm.
Battletech. A lot of the universe is about personal survival and struggling against the odds, which I think is ultimately endearing as character development goes.
Crazy scenario. Let's imagine it. BattleTech's picking up. More people hear about you. You all of a sudden become the most famous star in the world. You can't go outside. You can't go anywhere. People are pounding on your doors. So the government says, Tex, we're going to protect you. We're going to lock you in a room and feed you and provide for you for the rest of your life so you have privacy. But will only allow you one sci-fi franchise in that room. Because they can only do so much.
Right,
and there's like
right.
rights and there's licensing concerns,
sure.
okay?
Yeah, no, I'm envisioning this hell. Go ahead.
Which sci-fi franchise do you take? And you get all the content from that franchise. You get to take it with you. Games and all that stuff.
I would say if I can I play with my friends in this stuff? Is this still a play with friends thing, or is this sole enjoyment by my own?
You have visitation rights because they have to like escort people in. There's like a crowd of 5,000 people outside always. So
Oh
they have
my
a SWAT
God.
team to kick people in. So they can get one
I
friend
hate-
in once a
I
month.
hate this. One friend in once a month?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Dude,
This is
you're
horrible.
too popular. People are going crazy.
This is why I tell people I don't desire fame. I see people who thrive on this sort of attention, but it terrifies me. Like, this is genuinely anxiety provoking. Oh God. I don't know. If I had only one thing to enjoy and it was I could have a friend come over like once a month, I would probably take BattleTech with me just because we could play a good, match once a month. Now, if I could have like enough friends to run an RPG, Traveler, because Traveler you can do anything, include make battle mechs. You can make battle mechs in Traveler and they work. It's a great RPG system. Then Traveler is very healthy when it comes down to canonicity, because Traveler has always said there's the Traveler universe, and then there's your Traveler universe. And you can do whatever you want. So if in your Traveler universe there's no aliens and it's humans only, you can do that. If you want to play fantasy races in Traveler, you can do that. If you want to play high-tech or low-tech Traveler, you can do that. You can do whatever you want. And I find that that's really fun because it reminds me of just how great old-school RPGs are. It's that toy box where you can reach in and pull out whatever you want and play with your friends and say, let's all be action commandos, super commando types that are going to go into this evil guy's lair and prevent him from blowing up a planet. You can play James Bond in Traveler. You can play XCOM in Traveler. You can do so many wild and weird and wonderful things.
Michael, wasn't Traveler the RPG you had the most experience in? Or is it something else?
I have played it a bit, and I never put that together because I always loved Traveler, and it was hard to find people to play with.
Traveler is a smaller community these days, but as the people I meet in Traveler are amazing. Like, I had a question once, and I literally just emailed Mark Miller, the guy who invented Traveler, and I said, "Hey, Mark, question." He answered within 24 hours. Like, no sense of ego, no sense of I'm this big guy. He was like, "Oh no, here's the answer," and I was like, "What a nice person." Traveler's great.
This is maybe we're getting a little bit off track here, but what is your favorite Traveler system to play in?
Mongoose for the moment, just because I can get all those books very easy and I can hand those books out. Like, if someone doesn't have Traveler and wants to play in one of the games, I can send them 3 books for like under $50 and be like, "Here you go. Here's the books and here's everything you need." And then they can die in character creation like the rest of us.
One of my favorite moments of any Traveler game has been going through the character creation process.
A friend of mine, Aaron Paulette, said that Traveler is the ultimate midlife crisis simulator because all of your characters, once they've gotten out of character creation, are like 39, 40, and they're all space hobos. So it's just, it's pretty great.
And that sort of ties in again to the like you were saying about BattleTech, about it being a universe of flawed people and flawed systems that make flawed machines. Traveler is again a universe where no character is perfect. Even the characters you play are going to have all sorts of quirks and defects and history that you don't even fully control.
I had a friend of mine who was a veteran build a Traveler character and ended up with near identically the same injuries he sustained in war. By the time he got out of character creation, he's like, "What the fuck? I got out of character creation. I'm missing an arm. I'm missing a leg. All I have is this stupid fucking pension."
I came to Traveler to escape. It's role playing.
But that's fun because in Traveler, you get to build these characters that have a reason to do what they do. Same in BattleTech. In BattleTech, why are you a MechWarrior? It got me off this dirt ball of a planet. it's relatable.
And I sort of wish, maybe this is sort of my not touching the lore enough, but a lot of the stories are based around battle mechs because, like you say, everyone loves the big stompy robots.
You don't want a 15-part novel series on the guy who drives the fuel truck for the armor, right?
Yeah, but even the guy who loves a fuel truck, we did a BattleTech freaking survey a few episodes ago, and we asked, like, what's your favorite job in the BattleTech universe? Maybe a quarter of them involved piloting mechs, and then the rest were just this hugely varied, like, I'd probably just be a farmer, that seems safe. Or like, I want to be the guy who drives the coolant truck.
I think the best job in that setting would be bartender.
Oh yeah.
Get all the great stories.
Yes.
Get all the MechWarriors coming in flush with cash off their last job.
You're like, oh, you want a whiskey sour? That's 80 seagulls. I know you got the money.
So every universe has elements of crazy in it. And I'm wondering if you have a particular favorite crazy in BattleTech.
Okay, there's a few crazy things I love to point at. I had one person who got really, really mad because there's always that Reddit person or that person who has to actually, right? So this person goes, this mech cannot weigh 70 tons. It's like 8 stories tall. And I go, okay, what if it's a Star League ton? What if that is an abstract unit of measurement we have no understanding of? And they're like, it's not that. And I'm like, oh, what if that is the capacity, the loading capacity of the frame of that mech? Aside from what's already there, here's how much tonnage is available for you to play with. And they're like, no, it's not that. And I go, what about just make believe? It's a giant robot driven by a man-machine interface instead of a tank, which would be more efficient in every way. Just accept it. It's fun. It's make-believe. It doesn't have to be real. So that's one of the little crazy aspects is when people try to get very granular with the history and say, I disagree with the hard science of something. It's like, okay, you don't have to. It's the same people who also argue about like the lightsaber in Star Wars. They said if you held a plasma torch in your hand and it was burning hot enough to cut metal, it would kill you. And I'm like, of course it would, but it doesn't because it's Star Wars. There's the Force. You can throw things with your mind. Just relax. It's okay, right? There's giant artificial moons that shoot lasers that blow up planets. And there's an empire that thinks that's smart. Just let it go. But in terms of wackiness in BattleTech or craziness, I love some of the horror stories of the universe. I love the idea of the Black Marauder. I love the idea of there being this guy called the Bounty Hunter, who's like the Dread Pirate Roberts of the setting. I love all of these characters that are just completely zany, over-the-top nonsense, because in a universe like that, with that level of just casual war crimes, you would see crazy characters come out of nowhere. That's normal. When it comes down to craziness in the setting, I like the idea that every so often, the craziest, funniest thing in the setting that I just love is eventually someone says, what about reforming the Star League? Like somebody just goes, you know that thing that was so monolithic and huge and unified us, but so flawed it burned down twice? What if we made it again, but with blackjack and hookers? And then people inevitably try to do that. And so it's like someone, it would be imagine if someday in the near future in Germany, some guy goes, what if we reform the Holy Roman Empire? Like what if we did that? We just got all the electors together. We made new electors and we made the Holy Roman Empire again. We'll just put a Habsburg in charge. And there's still a few of those around. Let's do that again and just go back to a confederation that barely makes sense and speaks the same language, kind of. Let's do that. I love the idea of the constant reformation of Star League being this overarching plan or ploy for people. It's kind of like the successors of the Roman Empire, all claiming to be the Roman Empire. It is a believable thing in history, but it's also hilarious to me.
It's a little bit weird to me because between the time of the Star League and the time of most of the stories, like there's been a lot of time between those. There's no one who remembers that time anymore.
Oh, of course.
Seems a little bit dodgy sometimes exactly how well everyone remembers. Like, is the Star League just like purely distant memories of like good feelings, sort of like the Holy Roman Empire?
Well, of course, it's anything that lasts long enough and is big enough in our history becomes eventually folklore and mythos just by weight of its existence in our perpetual memory and in our history. And over time, governments who want to make allegory of people who did things right will raise this empire up and go, wasn't this the greatest high mark of our lives? And it casts such an appallingly long shadow. You find historians that come after the fall of the Roman Empire, they always talk about the Roman Empire. Even if they're not talking about anything to do with the Roman Empire, they will draw comparisons to it because that is the yardstick they have to measure. This was the great successful empire, and here's why it fell, or here's why they were successful, or here's why they were so great, or here's why they were so decadent they collapsed. It becomes that common yardstick. People can grok it. They understand what it is, and the facts of it become lost.
Maybe this is just my own experience, but are there a lot of sort of like depictions of that in the lore? Like, do we know like what do the people of the BattleTech verse think about the Star League? What stories do they tell about it?
Well, you find people using Star League ideas, especially combined arms and stuff. You find people using Star League definition of military ranks, form, function, and organization. So some of those ideas perpetuate of Comstar, of course, and many other Star League institutions, Comstar once being SL Comnet. You find a lot of little things happen that more or less draw people back to compare to it. But when it comes down to actual historians or people in the setting having a great understanding of it, my view of the lore is that most people in BattleTech are very happy to know the 20 years before them and live in the now because they don't have time to really wax poetic. It's about survival.
Mhm.
So if you're in the Succession Wars, you're probably going to understand that there was once a Star League, it once collapsed, and your faction is the one who are the rightful heirs to that, and everyone else is a bastard, right? But that's your spin on it. You're probably not going to be going through the minutia and going, isn't this part tragic, or this part was unavoidable, or what have you, because people have a very limited historical lens.
Mhm.
When I started to write Text Talks BattleTech, it started off as a very broad lens, a very omniscient point of view, where I knew
Mhm.
everything and I could make modern day jokes and everything else like that. But as time went on, I made the decision to write things in universe with a semi limited understanding of some events, and certainly not an omniscient point of view, and certainly with healthy and reasonable historical biases based on fact, but certainly from a point of view that is of a skeptic and an outsider to most commonly held convention.
Even that is like quite a broad view in the context of the universe. You're sort of, I guess, narratively like, some sort of military historian in the universe. You have extensive access to a lot of information about these things. For the average person, on an average planet, their history is going to be even more limited.
Well, certainly, access to information is everything. It would be like if you took someone who is a graduate of high school, who had just graduated from high school, and you asked them from any high school in the United States or Canada, and you asked them as a fresh graduate of high school, write a comprehensive history of the collapse of the Roman Empire, go. And they would struggle with the knowledge they had. They would struggle with access to resources, and many of them would feel completely overwhelmed. As someone who had been through further education, who understands the difference between history and historiography, how history is written, and then applies that with real world knowledge in between to fill the gaps based on their profession or what they've done in their career up to that point, it arrives at creating a gestational lens through which to view history, which is going to be flawed, biased, and limited, as any human lens will
Mhm.
be. You cannot know everything in history. A great example of that in modern history is, I would say, look at the buildup to World War One and look at the explanation of the outcome of World War One. There are 100 books on this. Robert K. Massey's book, Dreadnought, here is a wonderful breakdown of how you arrived at the building of the Dreadnought fleets that clashed at Jutland and more or less defined the first major international arms race between industrialized nations. This was the race to space for its era. This was the race to nukes for its era. And it begins truly in the 1840s and 50s. You have to take all of these tiny little parts of all of these cultures who are all very different, and you have to discuss the royalty, the royal families, who they were, the politics, the various members of the various councils of state, whether you're talking foreign office, policy offices, and everything else, the engineers and the admirals and the sailors, and how they came up through changing times, and how all of those things then combined and collided to produce this effect. History is much the same way. In the BattleTech setting, I try to blend all of that as someone who is a trained historian to try to show that these things don't happen for no reason. The Charger, for instance, is a battle mech that is routinely shit on for just being, it is one of the worst battle mechs of all time, and that's because the original summation of the Charger is like 2 paragraphs. But if you place it where it exists in the timeline, and you look at what's happening politically in that timeline, and you look at who's in charge of the government at that timeline, and you look at the behaviors of these companies in that timeline, and you realize that, wow, this is a government that's starting to teeter. This is a government that's starting to have internal security issues. This is a government that is also buying everything it can sight unseen to make sure these weapons don't get into other people's hands. This is a government with very bad procurement authority. And you start placing all of those steps in line, and all of a sudden you can understand why the Charger was the way it was. It was not ever going to be a good product. And so the layered nuance of history all comes from those lenses. I draw a lot from my day job and being able to do that, my experiences up to that point being transposed and transmuted through the character I play. But I find that anyone else who does the same is going to come at their own lens and own viewpoint of things. If you did just a MechWarriors take on that, it would say, this is a piece of shit machine, and I don't understand why people drive it because there are more efficient machines and lighter tonnages. And that, based on warfighting experience, based on their inputs, would be equally as correct. They would be biased in their own ways. And so that gives them their lens and their version of the truth, which in historical terms, I hate to say this, truth is very subjective.
I think that's what a lot of people love about the Text Talk BattleTech series. I know it's something I've enjoyed. You talk about all this and putting it into the context and understanding why things happened. How much of the the narratives you tell do you feel comes from the fiction as written, and how much is sort of editorializing by you as the historian, and your context and background?
I would say 75% is fiction is written, and then there are always gaps. Anyone who wrote any of this stuff, there are holes in the story. So there will be events on a timeline and paragraph, and then 3 years paragraph, and then 3 years paragraph. And so I have to go find other elements in the universe as written and start putting those in between to try to layer that to make sure that, okay, am I seeing this the right way? Event A, you have a very poor leader of the Star League. Event B, Star League collapses. Now, I can just say there was a bad leader and then he died and then it fell apart. Or I can start to say, well, then there was a Maris. Well, then there was the unresolved state security issues that were plaguing the time. Well, then there was a lot of distrust between the states. Well, then there was a giant arms buildup. And so all of these elements then start supporting a thesis. This was inevitable. This was going to happen. Then I can put my own lens on that. But I have to make sure it's there first. I try to make sure as best I can that I don't twist things to fit my view, because that would be very, very disingenuous. You never want to be the person who says, here's exactly what happened. But you have to say, here's what I believe happened. You have to leave room to be wrong as well, or have debate as a historian, because you weren't there. If you say, here's exactly what happened, in fact, you're no longer a historian, but an amazing time traveler.
So historians come up a lot. In general, we've actually had some previous guests on the podcast that were also historians, such as Keith Hahn, who is one of the project development people of BattleTech. And, I'm not a historian myself. I'm wondering if you see a connection between the love of history and the love of BattleTech. Why are historians drawn in?
I think historians are drawn in because everything is layered. It's beautiful. Talking with my fellow content creators, I talk with Big Red, I talk with Mechanical Frog, I talk with Sven. We all have wonderful discussions back and forth, and we talk about things we like and things we see. And we're all, in essence, either historians by hobby, because we all love history, or we are historians by semi-profession and being content creators in this. And either form of history is historianism, historiography. I shouldn't say historianism. God, that makes me sound very stupid. I should say that it is a very accurate interpretation of historiography, how history is written. And then you have different people with different lenses walking into that by saying, I think this history suggests X, or I think this history suggests Y. That's where the personal biases, the lens, and everything else comes in. And you shape your history around your experiences to that point. You try to be as fair and honest as possible. Now, I think that historians love BattleTech because there's enough gray and enough murkiness to where you can approach the same thing, the collapse of the Star League, 100 different ways. You can look at it from the periphery perspective and go, this was inevitable because these guys were conquerors and they had no long-term game other than conquer stuff and add to the state. You can look at it from the Great House point of view and say, this was a flawed concept because all of us want this power and only one person can have it. And as the states grow outward and grow more powerful, it creates a power imbalance with those who rule, which are the hegemony, and the states in the center, which are limited in power and have artificial constraints on everyone's military budgets and so on and so forth. And you can look at all of these things different ways, bring your own biases, your lenses, whatever you wish, your interests, and you would bet your ass that the Taurian version of the collapse of the Star League is going to be 1,000% different than the Steiner version of the collapse of Star League. Each of these lenses, each of these places is going to be utterly unique and utterly interesting. And if you have historians approaching a point and all having concurrence over some basic facts, the Star League fell, and then there was an era of great unrest and war, that's fine. But what's finer, and this is what draws people in, is that you can have endless debate over the minutia of why. You can have endless debate over who was right. You could say Amaros was right. He knocked it down and it was a rotten house. Or you can say Kerensky was right. He was trying to preserve the better virtues of something that he knew was flawed, but it was better than lawlessness. And then you can say, yeah, but then Kerensky went on and his son was crazy and they created this warrior society that had a caste system and believes in eugenics, and you can just keep going and going and going, and that's the funness of it. I think that you can bring your own spirit and heart to things and slice it however you want and live in whatever camp you wish in this universe, and then have your own view of history, have your own view of culture, have your own view of what is best in the world. That's what's great about BattleTech is it allows personal ownership and identification of what you like, what you dislike, and then there's healthy debate over it. There's no absolute right or absolute wrong in BattleTech. It's innumerable shades of gray. That's what draws people in. It's real.
You have a very unique view of the BattleTech universe in terms of how it's informed. You're a historian, a writer, researcher, you've worked in military, and this produces your unique lens, which the community loves. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, is there one particular thing, a trait you have, a background you have, that you feel that is the linchpin that gives you the unique perspective you have on the BattleTech universe?
I would not. I again say I feel lucky. There are 100 content creators out there making things on any subject you want. You could say, like, who's big in the ironing pleated pants on YouTube category, right? And there's going to be 100 people who are doing that very thing. You could say who is in the top 100 of making toast daily content on YouTube. There will be 100 people doing that, but there will be one or two that have more success because of just algorithm or what have you. I again feel lucky. If I had any one trait that I had to define me, is that luck and follow through. If you start something, finish it. If you're going to do something, don't half-ass it. Do the best you can and learn from your mistakes. If you fuck up, try again. Don't lose heart. And as you go along, the one thing that I think really does help me keep going is I make positive friendships. I make positive associations with many other wonderful content creators who are approaching this journey from their own angles, their own backgrounds, their own lives, and they are pouring their hearts into that. And when you see their success, it makes you realize, I am blessed to be here. I don't think that there's any magic to what I do. I think it's just earnest care and being very lucky to be held in such esteem by a fan base that also cares.
Digging a little bit deeper in that, so taking the success and the recognition aside, what about from the perspective of what makes your view unique? For example, if I was speaking of myself, like my background is acting, philosophy, public policy. So when I look at the BattleTech universe, things are very relatable to me because I understand how complicated policy and philosophy can be, and I see these leaders trying to implement things, and I understand how things can easily fail. To me, the failure that I see in the universe is very realistic because the perspective I come from is, yeah, public policy is friggin' hard. There's a lot to take into consideration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just really interested in that regard because once again, you've such a breadth, and I think it's an unfair question because I'm sure you as a person, you're not like, I'm 25% historian, 25% researcher. It's like everything is a melting pot inside you.
Oh, I agree. I think we are all the distillation of our experiences up to that point.
Is there something when you're talking to, like, let's say you're talking to me right now. You are talking to me right now. Let's not say we don't need a role play. This has actually happened. We're talking.
Consider the situation.
Imagine.
Consider we are having a conversation over the internet.
When you're talking to me and when you're showcasing your perspective, what unique attribute do you have that you feel adds value to the conversation? What's your unique perspective that you can bring? And what's the key element of that? Is it just the way you look at things fundamentally differently? Is it a background historical experience? Is it, like you said, this earnest work effort and commitment? Is it not one thing? Is this question stupid? Just say it, man. Let me hear it.
Here's what I think on that. I would say that a lot of what I do comes down to just a very, 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 very strong work ethic. And as I said, I feel very lucky and very blessed. I do not think that I am the greatest. I do not think I am the premier of anything. I do not think that I deserve a pillar or a plinth or a stage. I merely am content to be a voice in the choir. But if I had to say that there was a skill that had helped me, it is the ability to listen, not wait to speak, but to listen. As you get older in life, you realize that speaking is less important than listening. It's not something you can really appreciate until you get a lot older in life, because you realize that it is smart to not make mistakes, but it is wise to learn from the mistakes of others. And so when you are trying to learn things, I would wager that there are very few things you can learn by talking. I am willing to wager there are many more things that you can learn by listening. Just being patient and listening, being open-minded and listening. You will find so many divergent opinions, philosophies, ideas, and everything. And I've learned a lot over the past few years I will go make a video or I will go do one of these things and I will build it. And then I will have people who talk to me who say what this means to them. And I don't mean that they kiss my ass and go, that was great. I am famously someone who does not know how to take praise. And I always try to shrimp out from under that spotlight and say, no, it's my team. No, it's my editors. No, it's my staff. No, this is Eldonius's art, and this is Lou's art, and this is, Bruin's art. And I always try to promote other people and then hide while people are applauding for them. I run out the back door. But when it comes down to learning, why do these things resonate with people? Where are you succeeding? Where are you failing? What could you do better? Listen. Always listen. There are many, many things you can learn by listening. Say little, observe much.
That to me is an extremely powerful message. And it resonates with me on so many levels. And I find it very interesting because if you think about it, fundamentally your platform as a content creator in terms of the Text Talks BattleTech series, it's a monologue essentially. So
Sure.
from people that looked at it from an external perspective and didn't understand that the foundation of the monologue was listening, community, that can change things. But what I'm hearing here is the monologue exists, the stage exists because it's built on the listening and experience of others. And that's a beautiful thing. When I think about theater, myself and my background in performance art and traditional theater, Shakespearean style theater where there's the audience and the stage, which is essentially what YouTube in many ways represents when we have a single creator creating content. It sort of represents you're the audience, you're sitting in the theater, you're looking at the stage, you're directed your attention to one specific area of focus. You're not surrounded by it, just this sole source of focus. And that concept of entertainment, of learning, of sharing information is very traditional. And often people don't see creating performance, the actor, the face is one small thing. When I'm doing voiceover, people have praised me at conventions, been like, oh my God, that's amazing. You bring the production to life, et cetera, et cetera. But, I'm working with audio engineers. I'm working with writers. I'm working with directors. All these things are happening in tandem in studio. It really is about communication, about, like you said, listening. And so that's a very powerful image because it makes, when you have developed a persona, which I know you don't want to develop persona, but that's the nature now of your renown, is that people will listen to you, they won't know you, and they'll put a persona in their mind. Sometimes they view people as a mountain, someone standing alone, like they are the holy man. But that's not what you are, and that's not what you want to be. You are a community leader, if anything. Or not even a community leader, a community voice. A voice of the community.
I would say I'm a voice in the community. There are many other voices, and part of listening, just for instance, the charger, like I said, was summed up with "it's a crap mech," and that was pretty much it. And I said, I wonder why this persists, right? I had to ask that question. Why does this view of the charger persist? Because it's said in lore it's a crap mech, but people still play with this thing. There's still people who drive it around and do stuff with it. There's still people who go around and have fun with it. So why does this persist? And I found out the reason why that very dim view of the charger persists is because most of the people who know the charger know it from stuff like MechWarrior Online or MechWarrior 5 or any of these newer games and iterations where melee is really not a thing until recently in MechWarrior 5 at least, and it's just an undergunned mech. And so I went to tabletop groups that are fans of my work and my team's work, and I said, hey guys, what do you guys think about the charger? And I just sent emails to a couple of game stores I know and a couple of groups, and a lot of them said, well, it's a pain in the ass at first because you can't shoot anybody. But as soon as you get in range, it's clobbering time. And they started doing Macho Man, oh yeah, you're stuck in here with me for 5 minutes. Everyone started talking old WWE shit. And I went, this has a certain feel in the community. So I listened to that. And so I said, yes, it is on the whole not great, but for a certain group of people, it is that absolute Ayatollah of rock and rolla. It is that murder machine just by listening to people. And it gave so much more to that thing. And I know a lot of people vibed with that. That's kind of where you learn how to do stuff when you're writing, is you don't need to go out and search for a subject matter for a story. All you have to do is sit around and listen to your friends and your loved ones and people who know you, and they'll bring a story to you.
On the topic of being this person in the community, not necessarily, as you said, you don't want to be the voice of the community, you want to be a voice in the community. You have a character, Randolph P. Checkers, who is essentially, as far as I understand it, the largest canonized real life person in the universe. How does it feel?
That's a bizarre thing. Humbling. I would say humbling. I'm not a I am famously a person who has avoided pretty much every invitation to go to a con to speak, to be at a table or a panel to speak. I've avoided all of that like the plague. I'm not a people person. I'm genuinely autistic and I get overwhelmed by crowds. I don't understand how to take praise. Again, you don't sound this misanthropic and low unless, a lot of bad shit had happened to you, which it has. And so I typically don't understand it. I do things because I feel it must be done. And I do things because of a self-propelled nature of who I am. To find that people had elevated that character and loved that character and then made it canon, and now there's parts of people who still poke me and ask, "Oh, I want to know about Van Zandt," or "I want to do this." And that's just amazing to me. I still don't know quite how to take that. But I would say if anyone needs to know how I feel on it, I would say that this is just proof that this is a good community because it shows that the people who play BattleTech and self-insert and make their own. I mean, who hasn't made their own mercenary lord in BattleTech? Who hasn't made their own mercenary commander? Who hasn't made their own cool captain in the Davion Guard? Who hasn't made their own cool clanner dude? This universe belongs to the community. It belongs to the players who keep it alive. And that is a reminder. So anytime people try to point out this legacy of my character, I go, right, but this is also your legacy as well. You are an equal part of this, if not greater, by keeping this game alive.
It's really interesting because the position you've sort of been not put in, but how you've evolved. I know that you initially started Text Talks BattleTech despite someone who said BattleTech had no story.
They said it had no story and the setting was dead and no one cared about it and there hadn't been a computer game in it in forever. And they just kept doing the things of shade. They just kept hosing me down with shade. I did the Khrushchev thing. You take the shoe off and you bang it on the table and you're like, "I will bury you." I had my moment of spite. That became my white whale. I said, "We shall see."
And yeah, so now the guy's buried somewhere. We don't talk about where.
No, we still talk. He said, "I can't believe you did all this out of spite." And I'm like, "Yeah, yep."
Spite's a powerful motivator, I know.
Yes, yes, it is. And as any dude who's been dumped over some, you get dumped for any reason. Spite is a powerful motivator. I'll show them. I'll start working out 6 times a week, And as long as it results in a positive change that isn't toxic or negative, yeah, go for it. I mean, whatever motivates you, make it work. Just don't end up doing the Ahab thing. Don't have a white whale. Do not fire your heart at something.
Smitism. It can be like a, well, not smitism, spitism.
Spitism.
Smitism's
It is my philosophy.
Different degrees.
Yeah, I was gonna say
smite you.
Yeah, I will smite you in the name of Paylor. No,
So what's the line between you, Tex the persona, and Randolph P. Checkers? I know you've told me, you don't classify yourself as an actor. So
No.
Is there a delineation for you?
It's the same voice, and it's largely the same mindset. As I said, I had to insert a few things into that character to make them feel like they were in the setting. One, the guy has one eye and one arm and one leg. It's because anybody who drives mechs is not going to come out of there looking good. I think it's rare you have MechWarriors who get through a career looking stellar. It's not like a modern fighter pilot where they take no hits unless they die. This is BattleTech where you're just grinding against shit every day. So injuries are common. I gave the character a bit more of a spiteful lens than I possess in real life, and I realized that would naturally arrive out of being a cynic at seeing the great powers, whether they be the clans or the great houses or potentates and kings and pirate and mercenary lords, all trying to order their domains. He's a counterculture guy. So he sees those things and he goes, that's all bullshit, and let me tell you why. Being a bit more disagreeable than I am in real life. I'm a very open-minded guy. I will listen to pretty much anybody talk about anything. And I will, of course, so long as they leave room for me to respectfully disagree. The character that I guess play is a lot more inclined to bash you over the head with a beer bottle if he disagrees with you, because he's a rough and tumble character for a rough and tumble setting, much like I think you or I would be if we were inserted into that universe. You're not going to say, "What's your boggle, friend?" if somebody pulls a gun on you in BattleTech. You're going to hit them with the chair, right? You're not gonna try to talk people down, because the consequences to violence in that setting are significantly less than real life. In the modern world, punching someone out is probably not the best resolution to a disagreement. In a periphery bar, choked with cigarette smoke and filled with MechWarriors, punching someone out is probably settling the bar tab, if we're being honest.
Yeah, in the BattleTech universe, if someone comes up to you and says to you, hey, you know what? There's no story, there's no history with your culture, there's nothing like that. You solve by punching them. But in the real universe, you make Tex Talks BattleTech.
Right. It's one of those things where there are differences. I have my own biases, as I've been very honest and open about. I know some people find my biases too much because they go, "Tex, why you hate the clanners?" And I'm like, because they are a caste system ruled by a eugenics program. I think those are shitty precepts for rulership. Yes, I am biased against that. I think that is crappy. But I also admit that the clans are not monolithic. Even within the clans themselves, they're not monolithic. There's all these different people, there's all these different things playing against each other, there's little factions in politics, and that's what makes them interesting. They're more granular than I let on. And that's fine, because I also made my character have, a clanner ex-wife. So if you want to know why there's a bias, it's like some guy in a trailer park bitching about the ex, going, "Oh, she ran off with the truck," or whatever. It's you can feel sorry for the character and realize, yes, he is flawed, but you understand why. And there's more truth than bullshit in what he says.
Going back to, earlier we were talking a bit about what it is to like be a historian in the BattleTech universe. And it's really interesting that like to you to like be a historian of BattleTech, you had to be a historian in BattleTech. It's not strictly you reading it.
I saw no other way to do it. I said, this is a universe that it's beautifully written with wonderfully nuanced elements and all of this wonderful just character growth. If I wanted to write a history that had to be taken seriously, I have to write it from the in-universe perspective. It would be much the same if you wanted to write any sort of history that is believable in a fantasy setting. You would want to write it as a monk or a scribe who is living in that world. If you open a D&D book and you see here's literally all the gods and all the things that are going on in heaven right now. Next page. Okay, here's literally the list of all the demons and devils and everything going on in hell right now. Next page. If you see the DM view of the world and how it's ordered, all the magic is gone. All the magic is gone. But if you suddenly open the D&D book and you have little missives and stories written from inside the universe, just like you get in the TRO guides, the little box stories that say, here's this thing that happened, why this tank is cool. Instead of, this tank moves this fast and kills this good. That's not interesting. But if you read the story of how it rolled out in its first combat scenario and how it did not win, and that made the company rebuild the power plant so it could actually kick this other company's ass, and then they could have a good fourth quarter and a good Christmas. You read all those elements, and that draws you in. That's that missing human element. And BattleTech is a setting with, yes, giant stompy fucking robots, but it's a human story. That's why it draws you in.
Talking to you here has like opened my eyes to a whole new aspect. We've talked in the past about like BattleTech is a lot of things to a lot of different people. A lot of people like to engage with, some people just like to play the game, some people like to play the computer games, some people like to just read the lore. And that's sort of how I always treated like, people who engaged with the lore is like, yeah, they like, they like to read the books or they like to write short stories. But talking to you here has sort of like really, really opened my eyes that there's a whole nother aspect of engaging with the lore, which is like you say, historiography. It's a universe that you can come in and you can play historian. You can pick out pieces and figure out stories and draw together threads and write narratives about why things happen. And that's very cool.
Well, it reminds me of like, especially in the Star Trek community. Are you guys familiar with Filk?
I've not heard the term.
I am not.
Filk is folk music in science fiction. People like Leslie Fish wrote whole albums. A good song out there for people to listen to, Banned from Argo, that is basically a shitpost of a Star Trek story. Folk music in film is an old staple of conventions, and it's written in universe. It is the folk music of that universe written in universe. Really wild, crazy, zany stuff. But it jives with people, and it's still memorable because of that reason. When you write things from an in-universe perspective, I think it adds a certain human element to it, especially if it's just music. BattleTech has a lot of music now. I will say that most of it has been written by my friend Goat, who has written all sorts of crazy songs and stuff for BattleTech, and he writes it from an in-universe perspective. And so it's little barroom songs and simple ditties and rehashing of old tunes, because if it's not new and it's not old, it's folk music. And so these things live on forever, and you'll find lyrics get swapped out and changed of a song that's 1,000 years old, much like how we do that today. And so I find that if you have an enduring human element, an enduring human lens, a universe feels that much more real.
Mm-hmm.
And in BattleTech, that can be you. You can imagine how you would react. What does this universe mean to you when you're transposed into there?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that if you were a mech warrior in BattleTech, I would say maybe 10% of your time would be spent in a cockpit, and maybe of that 10% of your time, 1% of it would be spent shooting people. I think the rest of it would be spent doing boring, crazy, inane bullshit. And if you can fill out the rest of that, everyone says, this is my favorite mech of my mech warrior who's this guy. And I ask questions that make them pause. I go, what's their favorite beer? Where do they hang their hat? Where do they shoot pool? Where do they go see movies? What's their favorite movie? What's their favorite music? And so if you add these elements to somebody, because if I asked, what microphone are you using right now to record stuff, you could rattle it off. And I could say, all right, well, what made you choose that microphone? Very different story. Why do you drive this mech? Well, because it kills good. Why did you choose it? Different story. You need to add those human elements to things. Your own biases to things like, okay, let's say that I had both of you in the room right now, right? Let's presume we are occupying a physical space. Let us role play. And I say, gentlemen, I will take you both to lunch. Are you going? And I say, I will take you both to lunch. What do you want? Are you going to say, I don't know?
I'm going to say, Tex, whatever you want, please just take me to lunch with you through this big crowd outside, please, as the SWAT team busts in.
Fuck that. No. Yeah, no,
I don't know. Do they have hamburgers in this setting?
Yes. See, that's what I mean, is you're not going to say, I don't know or I don't care. You have biases and preferences. So when all things are equal and you have freedom of choice, so would your character. That is human. Your character would have things they cannot stand for personal reasons and experiences, and then they would have things they absolutely desire. Why do they do this hazardous job? Why do they go fight people with robots? There has to be a payoff. Maybe they, in between battles, pull down from their visor that postcard of that beautiful beach they saw once. And in moments of silence and missions, they can hear the coastline and the shore and the seabirds, and they can feel the wind in their hair. And they can escape that hellish moment. Humans have human motivations.
One thing that I find really this is a compliment that might make you uncomfortable, so I apologize in advance. But sorry, not sorry.
Sorry. The Canadian sorry.
The Canadian, it's a true Canadian sorry. Sorry
I
about
appreciate it. Yeah. I'll put it in the wallet. I'll save it for later.
Is when I was initially listening to your stuff, I really look at stuff naturally from the lens of performer because that's what I do, and I'm critiquing it, I'm looking at it, and all that fun stuff. And so,
No, of course, that's your lens. That's your lens, of course.
in voiceover, there's a big bias where the general population, if you're not working in voiceover, they don't hear the performance, they hear the voice. So when people try to get into voiceover initially, they do characters, they do impersonations, and they say, I can do these voices, therefore I can be a voice actor. But to actually perform, you can't just do an impersonation. You need to be able to go through all the ranges of emotion. You need to have emotionally connected characters. And when I initially listened to your stuff, you have a great voice, for one. And I listened and I thought to myself, is this just the voice I'm hearing? The voice is an intoxicating thing, including when we listen to ourselves on mic. It's very easy to get seduced by our own voice. So I'm getting seduced by your voice. I'm taking my clothes off, just the normal stuff that I do when I listen to voiceover. And I realize how, after paying attention, how connected you are to the text and your delivery. It's real. Like it feels you as Tex, you as Randolph P. Checkers, very emotionally connected and grounded to this universe. And I think that's one thing that really elevates your work, in my opinion, because I'll just say it, like if someone came out and put out a video with the Tex voice, which is possible via AI and stuff like that, it would not land at all, because that grounded nature you have, that connection to community, that how deep you go in your dives, like what beer would your character like? What would this be? Really diving in. That is really, as an actor, you have to do that when you build your characters. And it's so hard to go layers and layers and layers deep. And just hearing you talk about it, I can really understand that process is part of the reasons why I think you feel so emotionally connected in your voiceover delivery.
I will say for the record that I do not like my own voice. The reason is I used to sound fairly normal. I used to have a much wider range of voice, and I unfortunately have catastrophic throat damage. And that's the reason why I sound the way I do. And it's sometimes incredibly painful to speak for longer than 30 minutes. And so I have to stay very hydrated and keep my voice as best I can. And sometimes I will get excited and I'll speak and my voice will start to break and I'll lose it, which is something I have to really carefully watch on. I've never really liked my own voice. And I have so many people who comment and they go, oh, it's this wonderful gravel and guts and all that other stuff. And in my private mind, I wish for them to hear the words in context of the voice, but not the tone and timbre of it, if that makes sense. I think if I came out sounding like I was on helium, I would want them to pay as much attention, though I know that is not ever going to be the case.
I would argue that if your voice was like you're on helium, obviously people don't like listening to
Hi, spooky voices when BattleTech is my favorite thing. I love to charger. Whee!
But I still think that because of the work, the layering you do, that emotional connection, it's going to come through. Yeah, I think that's really special. And yeah, anyhow, I'm sort of just really stewing in the conversation so far. And you mentioning your connection is to community and everything. It's a really cool synergy. And I think everything just, your hard work, your philosophy, your worldview, everything is just mingling right and resulting in this really just emotionally connected delivery of voiceover.
I think that it's important to realize that if you're speaking from an in-character or in-universe point of view, you're going to be just as flawed as you are in real life. You're going to have the same mistakes, the same hangups, the same propensity to misjudge or mischaracterize. You're going to have the same flaws. You're going to have the same fears. You're going to have all of these things that go into who you are. But when you draw on something as painful as memory, especially memory related to combat, you're going to have a very different way of saying things. You're not going to be able to make jokes about everything. You're going to draw some very dark characterizations. I had one person who wrote me who said that they laughed until they felt very sad about something I said in BattleTech 101, and I didn't even say it. I had my editor put it on screen where the arrow points to the Steiner General's medals, and it says, "These medals were once somebody's children." And he just said, "Jesus Christ, that's dark." And I go, exactly. This is a point of view. Because I think if you had any of us in this room had to create a character that had to fit in a universe that is compelled and driven by conflict, they wouldn't have a cheery point of view unless they were absolutely batshit insane. Like if somebody is going around going, "Golly gee, I sure love the inner sphere today." You know?
Then you can throw that high-pitched voice in.
Exactly.
Perfect. Golly gee, sure love the inner sphere today.
That would be a Hunchback pilot. Just being like, you know, over the comms, you hear them playing like Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips as they're just talking like that. And you're like, oh, he's lost it. All right. But I just want to reiterate, I feel very, very privileged and very lucky in doing things the way I do them. And that's why we've made sure that every single video we launch that's big is tied with a charity. I mean, we've raised just through the YouTube side of things, I think $170,000 for various charities, from cancer research to MS charities to Wounded Warriors to first responders, through just the YouTube and doing streams and stuff on the other side of it. We've raised probably another 200, 300,000. It's hard to keep track, which includes paying for funerals for people, Melissa No Ironwind medals expenses, a lot of stuff like that. And so I'm trying to make sure that I see fame as temporary. Fame in anything is temporary. And if you doubt that, ask any actor. Fame in anything, your stage, your moment, your 15 minutes of fame are temporary at best. So you have to use them well. You have to use them as well as possible. And as long as I have the stage, I always try to ensure that we're paying things forward, we're supporting good folks, we're trying to help people, we're trying to talk about other people's work as much as we talk about our own, and we don't end up huffing our own farts, as it were. Because it's very dangerous. That is very toxic to do as an artist, is to believe your own self-aggrandizement and to believe that the road goes up and the clicks go up and line goes up. And that's nonsense, because fame fades, importance fades, relevance fades. You need to make sure that you're using your energies for something that make a difference in this world. And I do firmly believe in that as a mission. Again, I feel absolutely privileged and lucky in being able to do this. But of everything else we take away from here today, I would say if you are ever in a position to be so lucky, to be seen as a great voice or a great name or a great person or a great creator, make sure you're making the world a better place as you do so, because it will mean something in the end. It is much more that than any sort of limelight you could worship or have for your own.
That's really interesting. Like, found this sort of success coming from something that was, you know, a hobby, an interest of yours. Part of yourself went into this and you enjoy playing it. And then this is almost going the other way. You know, you found that success, and how can you take that fun fictional world and use it to make a better impact on the world you do live in?
Well, right. I want to make sure that I'm doing the absolute best I can for other people, because if you go through life enough, you will find life will beat the shit out of you with zero notice. Life will just beat the absolute piss out of you. And the moments I'm most thankful for in my life were people who did not give up on me when things were really, really fucking tough. People who could have cut and run and walked away, and people who didn't. And so when I find that I'm in a better position, I find that it is only natural and right to do the same for other people, to build a broader stage, to help other people get something when they need it, to help make pain less for other people as best you can. Because no one asks for misfortune, right? It just happens. I mean, okay, some people do ask for misfortune. Some people go ring the doorbell on somebody and say, "Please punch me in the face." But that is rare. Most misfortune just falls on you someday. And so, you know, I think it's just only natural to do that, to try to help.
Just like the clanners are trying to help the inner sphere, right?
Yeah, they're trying to help them have less rights and a shorter lifespan.
2 improvements, man.
There's less to worry about.
So this is a fun question, but I really want to know everybody's take on this here. So is there anything that you would like to take from the BattleTech universe and plop into our own? You got to choose one thing.
Oh boy.
Say the Star League.
No.
Is it the eugenics?
No.
It's one of the two, right?
Genetic engineering would be interesting for like all of 5 minutes before you realize that it's just going to end up like paywalled, and it'll be like Amazon Prime presents, it would be really lame very quickly. It would be one of those things where, oh yes, the rich people have nicer stuff again, while the rest of us mooks run around doing what we do and enjoy a very impoverished life. No, it wouldn't be that. I like the idea of cool fusion power that fits in cars. I think that is a really neat idea.
Yeah, that would be pretty great.
I want fusion engines. I think that fusion is a bottleneck to the next generation of cool shit from humanity, whether it be space exploration or just building bigger, dumber stuff. And I think it would solve a lot of problems. Now, would it generate new ones? Absolutely. Absolutely. We might have a bit of a Cold War going after helium-3 on the moon. But it would be interesting. Fusion, definitely.
Yeah. Interesting new problems instead of the same boring old ones we've been
Yeah,
dealing with.
I want new problems. I think we deserve new problems.
That's a good way to look at it. Move into the next problem. Michael, what about you?
I mean, I think I'm biased now because I don't know. Tex's answer is really good. Fusion does sound really great. Someone should be working on that or something.
They're trying. They've been trying for a while, and
turns out it's hard.
It turns out that is really hard. And I've heard fusion in 5 years every 5 years of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should. I don't know. We could allocate some more funds to it. Maybe
I want
focus on it a bit more.
man-made sun. Nature-made sun boring. I want man-made sun.
We have sun at home. Sun at home.
That's a good brand name, man. Sun at home. Yeah, right?
Sun at home brand fusion. Yeah.
I would want jump ships. I want jump ships because I want stuff like the Black Marauder and Event Horizon to happen. No, just kidding. I think, being able to like travel the stars would be really cool. And I've always thought as a simple causal based A, B, C, I walk from here to get to there being, the concept of like just pew appear somewhere else. Oh my God. That's so magical.
I think the terrifying thing would be we send a jump ship out and it comes back like a year later and we're like, what is out there? What did you find? And they just look at us haunted and go, space is full. It's full. It's crowded out there. We're literally a backwater. There's good shit all around us and everything's taken. Space is full.
What foods would they come back with?
Oh man, that's a good one.
Probably nothing we can eat.
But if they come back at all, that would be our horror. We send out a ship and nothing happens. And we send out another one and nothing happens. And we're like, uh-oh.
Whoopsie.
Third time's the charm?
8th time's the charm.
Awesome. Okay, well, this has been really great. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about our resolutions for the new year. You, I think, previously, Tex, have mentioned that this feels like a BattleTech renaissance period. So much is happening with Catalyst. So much is happening with BattleTech. We're getting all these amazing miniatures. Kickstarters have been hugely, hugely successful. Are there any things coming into 2024, any BattleTech-related resolutions that you have? And I asked our Patreons as well, and I'll just share theirs really quick. I think they're going to be a very common sort of resolution that BattleTech players have. But Loremaster MagnumDanger, they want to do a lot more painting. Specifically, they want to run a hobby challenge on the MechBay Discord to try to get other people to paint their modes. The MechBay is it's another BattleTech podcast, a really, really good one. They have a really active Discord. And our technician Klint, same thing. He's like, oh man, gotta paint my miniatures. Gotta paint my miniatures. I imagine he was saying it when he was huffing like that because, as we all know, it can be some pretty dire efforts to paint those miniatures. But what about you, Tex?
Well, I am completely colorblind, so I paint nothing. There are only two things I know how to paint, which is I know how to apply parkerizing and I know how to apply bluing. That's a gunsmithing joke.
A gunsmithing joke to Canadians, Tex? Really? Know your audience, man. Come on.
Sorry about that, bud.
There we go. Finally, the respect.
I don't want to make fun of Canadians. They burned down the White House in 1812, so it's just like ha ha
And we've
ha.
been threatening to do it again ever since then.
That's the thing. All that has to happen is like hockey night and like get knocked off the air on Canadian TV, and then it's on. Like the real Cold War begins. Operation Canadian Storm.
Winter is coming. I love like the South Park, the war against the US and Canada. That is just like just the most hilarious skit.
I think that Canada would cross the frozen Great Lakes on cavalry of moose and zambonis, and we'd all be fucked.
If we can somehow tame the moose to ride, I think we would be a force to be reckoned with, but I think the moose are the true rulers of Canada.
I have seen the size of a moose, and I was like, holy fuck, nature is terrifying. They're huge. Yeah, like I knew a guy who hunted moose in Canada, and I was like, "Would he use a fucking anti-aircraft gun?" But New Year's resolution, I want to continue to make content in the good spirit and the way I do. And as a content creator, that is difficult. YouTube has been very terrible to most content creators over the last 10 years and has made it near damn absolute certain that unless you try to make daily content or weekly content, you get buried. And in long, slow passion projects like the ones I make, you're more or less told to go pound sand and suck it. It is really rough time. I want to make sure that I'm still doing things the way I want to. I want to make sure that I'm still doing things in an equitable way. I have been blessed and lucky thus far on YouTube. I pay my team a reasonable union rate. I pay people very well. I make sure that I do not, it took me 11, 12 years for my fan base to convince me to even take any portion of the proceeds for my own aim to include taxes, because I just wanted to keep paying it forward. I wanted to make sure that I was left holding nothing, no money, nothing, because what I got out of this was worth more than cash. What I got out of this was a sense of affirmation and creation, which is rare. Anyone who has built, craft, painted anything knows that feeling, and that is not something you can buy. It is something you have to sweat for. And so, I feel amazing when I finish these giant videos and my team delivers to me the final finished product. And as the director, I can go, yes, it is done. And then I move on to the next one, because that is a great feeling to build something that is that big and that hard to make. YouTube has been murderous to creators. And so I wish to continue to do that. And I wish to continue to evolve and host new people. Like Locust Labs in the last year has been a wonderful addition to the team and making stuff. I wish to continue to collaborate with all of these wonderful people I work with, because they just make amazing shit. And I feel so privileged to be able to work with them. I could live 100 lifetimes and not have the team I have. And I feel lucky. I don't feel like, oh, I've earned this, or, oh, now's my time in the spotlight. I feel like I need to put my whole team forward and say, take your bows. You guys have done the impossible time and time again, and you've made it look easy. And I wish to continue on that road, because I don't know where I'm going to end up in 10 years. But if I am fortunate and I am lucky and I am decent, I think that I will end up in a slightly better place, having made the world a slightly better place as I've done it. Because again, I feel just absolutely blown away that I can do this. If you had told me 10, 15 years ago that, hey, you'll be making feature-length documentaries on BattleTech and that people will clap and they'll sit around with their families and watch these premieres, they will take time off of work and order pizza and watch these premieres. There's a guy who sent me a fucking screenshot of them in a theater they rented out to watch these premieres.
Whoa.
And I go, this is bonkers. This is mind-blowing. I feel absolutely lucky. I feel like the luckiest filmmaker in the world. Yes, I will never be rich doing this, but I don't care because there is no money that can buy the feeling of having been able to do this. I would not change a thing.
I think one thing that's so interesting about the community that you keep referencing is that when we did the survey, our BattleTech survey or whatever, we had diversity across the entire survey for all the answers. A huge long survey. It took people like 2 hours to fill out. Very detailed. And there was diversity across all of it, except when it came, what do you like most about the community? Or what do you like most about BattleTech? And people were like, the community. It's open. It's, people encourage you, people bring you in. It's just a very warm place. And that's just, it's great to hear it from all levels, from everyone in it, from people that are new, from people that are renowned content creators, from everyone. It's pretty cool. It's pretty special.
I think it is. You'll find some communities where it's like, okay, if you come to this community, don't criticize the following things, don't talk about the following things, don't work for the following factions, or you're getting a fight with somebody. And it's like, but why? Like, it's fantasy, it's make-believe. Like, if I made something up right now, and then you picked a fight with me over it, I would say that's nonsense if I made something up. That is fantasy settings. There are people I know who seriously get into huge angry disagreements over what house you're in Harry Potter. Who cares? Who cares? Enjoy it. Enjoy what you both share a love of. And that's what I love about BattleTech is I can turn it into hatred on the tabletop. I'll be like, fucking Capellans trying to come over here and tell me what to do, and then you can shell them with long toms. And then, or he can run you down and make you part of the Confederation. And you can have those moments and then go laugh about it afterward. Because in BattleTech, one thing that's fantastic is if there's a fight between two factions, people don't start talking shit about the factions. People want to know, like a swordsman's duel, who won. How did the fight go? Give us a blow by blow. People love to get sucked into this shit.
Mhm.
That's why it's great.
Michael, how about you? What's your BattleTech New Year resolution?
I don't know. That's a tough, extremely heartfelt answer to
I'm
follow.
intentionally getting you to follow text, not me, in case you're wondering. Set me up, buddy.
That's what friendship is, throwing friends under the bus.
It's usually the other way around. I'm usually doing the bus throwing. Yeah, so this is it sort of ties in actually to a bunch of the things we talked about here, but I think for me, just very personally, I think I want to get more into the lore, more into the universe. I've sort of tended to be a little bit goofy around the lore and the history in the past. It's fun to laugh and talk about like weird things that don't make sense. But I think there's a lot of fun in taking it really seriously, like you've been talking about. Taking a very serious historical view as you go through these. And I love the idea of story first gaming. So like I want to do more of, coming up with a lance and, why is this team the way it is? Maybe not optimal for the mission at hand, but this is what I have. What's their history? What are their ties to the universe? Why do they have the mechs they have? I think that it would be more fun to play with a group of minis, painted or not, that are part of a team, part of the universe, instead of just treating them as a big Pokemon collection of different mechs to pick out which are optimal for the role you're looking for on this mission.
I love the idea of the Pokemon comparison because a friend of mine just put an SRM carrier on the field and goes, "War crimes, I choose you."
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I think for myself, probably, I've really wanted to narrate officially for Catalyst, so I'm going to keep trying to make that happen. The Stories of the Inner Sphere segments have been really picking up on our podcast, and I know lots of people appreciate those readings, and I love doing them. I love narrating, and I just know BattleTech. I connect to it so emotionally that I would love to do it, so I want to pursue that more, and I also want to keep, the podcast growing because we have sort of a little bit of a unique perspective that I think is valuable to have in the community, so let's share it around. We already have lots of great BattleTech content creators, but adding one more to the mix, I think, is dandy, especially considering we all tend to complement each other quite well. Like, we do different things, which is nice.
Well, and that's the thing I've said many times is I will occasionally get a fan who says, "Aren't you worried that someone's doing what you do?" And I go look at who they're talking about, and I go, "No, because they're doing it differently." We're all different voices in a choir, right? And so there's a baritone over there, and there's a bass over there, and there's a tenor over there, and everyone's singing. Shouldn't we all make beautiful music, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
I think that should be what we do together and collectively and harmonize.
From my perspective, at least who I've interacted with in the BattleTech community, really open to collaboration. And that's what I love to see because we don't necessarily want unification or anything like that. We don't want to create a Star League. Let's not be crazy.
Yeah, that's who would do that?
Yeah, whoa. But we do want to, collaborate. We want to be open. We want to hear new ideas. We want to be inspired from each other because, as you say, foundation of what we do is inspiration from the community and ourselves, a little mix in there. And if you're on an island, I think that it's just going to be a little bit disconnected. And that connection really, it's what lifts stories off the table. This was a really good segment, but we have to move on to the next one. Keep on listening, everybody.
Don't touch that dial. I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. Each jump ship is built around a Kearney-Fuchida drive, commonly called the KF drive. This miracle of pre-Star League technology can transfer itself and several hundred kilotons of attached vessels through hyperspace, appearing a short time later at a destination within 30 light-years. At the heart of the drive is a 25-ton titanium-germanium core, cooled by liquid helium and surrounded by complex control systems. While several shipyards still manufacture these drives according to standard templates, the details of designing and tuning the devices are still being rediscovered. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Tertiary Objective Battlefield Outcome Report segment. Initiating.
This is INN Boots on the Ground with a special broadcast coming live from outside the famed Institute of Inner Sphere War Studies. I'm led here today by a trustworthy insider who has evidence regarding an elaborate cover-up by the Draconis Combine regarding the existence of a sentient alien life form.
Yes, that's right. You didn't mishear me, Boots on the Ground listeners. A sentient alien life form, allegedly bird-like in nature, named the Tetatai. So, what does the ISWS have to do with the DC? A month ago, a large anonymous donation was received by the Institute of approximately 3 million C-bills, and that lines up to our tip of an exchange for this exact amount of Draconis Combine Ryu, the same day the donation was received. Coincidence? The Interstellar News Network certainly doesn't think so. And we plan to get to the bottom of this by... Wait. Is that who I think it is? Yes, indeed it is. Quickly, follow me.
Dr. Checkers, how do you respond to the allegations that the ISWS is involved in a Draconis Combine cover-up?
Who in the cinnamon toast fuck are you?
Don't play coy, Dr. Checkers. The entire Inner Sphere knows who I am, and you're no exception. What of the rumored Tetatai? The Inner Sphere has the right to know.
The Teta what? The bird people rumor thing? Are you smoking Canopus grape crack?
Mad Cat got your tongue? That's right, Dr. Checkers. We know the discovery of the sentient life form is being covered up by the DC and the ISWS. What do you gain from such a cover-up? Why hide the truth?
All right, this is the periphery, so I'll bite. Cite your proof or be deemed a crackpot.
I'm the one asking the questions, good sir. From your records, it seems you had historical dealings as a mercenary with the DCMS.
Have you personally profited from this cover-up? Times like this make me remember why I started drinking. First off, you don't deal with the DCMS, they deal with you. And if you're lucky, you get to keep your head. Second, a far-off world of bird people is pretty much the lousiest spacer story I've heard in a generation. As far as made-up nonsense goes, it's certainly up there. You dancing around my question simply proves your guilt in the eyes of public opinion. I ask again, why hide the truth? And I repeat, cite your sources for this being truth.
Also, what do I have to gain? Covering up the existence of large bird people only suggests that Draconis Fried Chicken has a new menu. So yeah, where are you getting this?
Iron and Boots on the Ground does not reveal the identity of its sources, sir.
In other words, you made it the fuck up. Classic.
Dr. Checkers, please! I am a professional. Let's be civil. The Inner Sphere deserves the truth that you are clearly hiding. What do you know of these sentient creatures?
I know that there certainly isn't a sentient creature standing before me right now. Do you have like a handler or somebody to run your teleprompter I can speak with? Do you have a phone number I can call so they can come collect you?
Randolph, the entire Inner Sphere needs to know. This changes everything. Why cover it up? What is the Draconis Combine offering you?
Security, get this guy out of here.
You can't hide the truth forever, Dr. Checkers! Boots on the ground will get off of me! Get to the bottom of this! The Tetatai are real! We've seen the photos! Wait! Are those feathers poking out of your bag?
And I thought the periphery was weird enough.
Welcome back to The Sphere We Live In. When calculating source and destination points, most jump ship navigators choose standard jump points, far from the star and stable enough to simplify calculation. There do exist, however, transient points closer to the star and planetary ecliptic, but where net gravitational forces approach zero. These points are constantly moving with planetary orbits, and since jump ships arrive stationary relative to the jump point, both location and velocity must be calculated. Navigators use jump computers to closely approximate the motion of the gravitational null, since any miscalculation here can easily end in disaster. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our Rule Check Discovery segment. Today we're going to cover 2 rules, one from the legendary Tex and one from our Patreon Metal Ed. Let's start with Tex. Tex, you made a mistake playing BattleTech? That hardly seems possible.
Well, okay. I've made many mistakes in my life. Again, you don't sound like this if all went well. When it comes down to the dumb shit I did in BattleTech, and this was when I was first starting out, and mind you, I cannot say I'm any better now because I use MegaMech these days. I'm very spoiled by something doing all the calculations for me. And I would say that most of my BattleTech experience these days is like Harebrained Schemes BattleTech, just because I find that such a wonderful combination of elements. But in terms of classic BattleTech tabletop, one of my first biggest mistakes I remember was my friends and I were all convinced that walking generated no heat, only running did. So what this does in BattleTech is when even walking generates no heat whatsoever, you have that much more heat to spend on Bang Bang. And so both of you will start walking toward each other rather than running. And both of you will just start teeing off on each other. And it's like that scene in Terminator 2 where they run into each other in the hallway and they just start shooting each other to negligible effect. So you have 2 robots that just square off on each other and just proceed to walk and lay and face roll the weapons controls the whole time as you're just hosing them and they're hosing you. And it really made a very embarrassing slow start to the game because it just felt like cheesing it. And then when we played with more experienced players and they're like, no, that generates heat, we're like, oh. And it's, we all make those mistakes, but we realize that even small game mechanics mistakes do have a pronounced effect on the game because it is a very complex game.
Yeah, as soon as you have a movement mode that doesn't cost heat, that just, wow, that really changes the complete value of that movement mode. Like that is, we already had people who've told us before that walking is their favorite movement mode. And if it didn't generate heat, that's huge. That's totally huge.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, early on in BattleTech, you learn that pavement is not your friend
Mhm.
because you'll be like, "I have a locust, it's really fucking fast," and you're like, "Okay," and then you run on pavement, it's like pilot roll check dead. Welcome to the floor, and I've lost probably more chargers in buildings, basements, and floors than I have in gunfire, just because you Kool-Aid man through something and explode, which is cool.
Yeah, totally.
Normally there's like this complicated trade-off of like trying to position yourself and trying to get the best weapon rolls and maintaining your heat the whole time and this whole like multivariate calculation. And then if it doesn't make heat, then you just do it all the time. You just walk everywhere all the time. Why not?
Well, it reminded me of kind of a takeaway of, imagine you're playing a first person shooter video game, right? And if you run, your crosshairs are wobbling all over the place. But if you walk, they don't. They stay like perfect. It's that same sort of mindset when walking generates no heat. By walking, yeah, everyone is going to slow roll into combat. And so it basically becomes, it's almost like everyone driving assault max all of a sudden. Even the lighter stuff, doing everything you can to stay within that threshold of walking. And it gets really dumb really quickly. So never make that mistake because it turns Battletech into a very awkward game. It's like watching two very drunk people trying to wrestle.
What were that old form of military, European style combat where they just line up and walk towards each other and shoot?
Yeah, okay. Well, you're either referring to the standards of the Holy Roman Empire, which is pike and shot formations, or you are referring to line infantry battles, which is, more Napoleonic stuff, or Frederick the Great, depending on variation of belief in fire and rank fire. But yeah, military historian speaking, but yeah, it is really dumb. It's like watching chess with guns. Peons forward.
So maybe you just got to put it in your headcanon that all your mechs were just like, this was a Napoleonic army of that time. And that's just how they did it. That was the rules of war. That was the Ares convention of the time. Sorry, guys. You can do whatever you want, but no nukes and no going over 30 kilometers an hour in the battlefield.
It reminds me of more like there's a concierge key that you can give someone when they valet park your car and it won't go above like 60 miles an hour, right? So everyone had that key and not the real one. So
The mech techs had enough with the reactors coming back overheated, so they just, welded a plate on the throttle.
it's a limiter plate, like an old NASCAR, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's a good one. And it's very transparent how it matters. Like that, like you say, those subtle little differences change everything. MechWarrior Metal Ed submitted Rule Mistake is a little bit different, and I still don't know if it made the game harder or easier for them. But essentially, he joined a group, and the group had been playing this way for a while, and he played the way they did for that game because they sort of informed him this was the way the rule was, as rule mistakes tend to get spread through a charismatic and opinionated game organizer. I wouldn't know anything about that. But what they believed is they believed that an engine slot, when it took a hit, you wouldn't cross it off. You'd still mark it off on the little area, but basically when another critical hit came into that area, it could still hit the same engine slot. And I can't decide, is that better or worse?
I mean, it depends on really the consensus of the group, which is probably how this rule propagated. You had enough people who came to consensus and said, this is what we believe this means. And if it makes sense to them and that's what they prefer, I mean, it's like a homebrew rule in D&D. I've seen a lot of stuff like that just propagate because people agreed that they liked this belief of the rule system better. And if everyone is measuring from the same cloth and measuring in the same way, then that's fine. It's not optimal, obviously, but it's fine if everyone obeys the same rule.
And I can sort of see like the reason, like, you're like, it's the fusion reactor. It's probably like super duper shielded right in the core of the mech. And you don't want the game to just like suddenly end because you got hit 3 times. Like, obviously it's that it's super durable, more durable than anything else on the mech. I get it. I understand it.
But what happens? When you normally get an engine hit, every engine hit technically decreases the probability of getting another engine hit, but increases the chance of other things like a gyro hit. Would you rather die from engine hits or gyro hits when you just get gyroed out and are lying on the ground, technically not enforced withdrawal, just lying there on the ground, unable to do anything? I feel like it's one of those things that makes sense because from, like you say, the fusion engine, it's a centralized thing. If you look at it in the slots way, it's almost like there's 3 separate components to the engine that are important to make it function fully. And you're like, oh, you got one. Now you got the other. But if you view it as a central point, it makes sense for it to go in. But definitely that changes the statistical probability of getting more of those hits. But I would personally rather die from engine hits than gyro hits. So maybe it's good.
Yeah. Probably depends a bit whether you do you like your mech battles ending with like both of the mechs getting disassembled like Black Knight style, like keep fighting until you only got one pip left and then finally bail out? Or do you like, oh, a lucky shot got through and knocked you down, oopsie doopsie, you can't stand anymore.
Totally. Let's imagine Metal Ed's rule or the rule mistake is the way. How would that change how you play, or would it change how you play?
I don't think it would change how I play, because what am I gonna do? I don't have a lot of control over where I get shot. And I'm always one shot away from death.
Well, and the way I see it is like as long as the rules are consistent and everyone agrees, it doesn't kill you and it doesn't kill your love of the game. So long as they are consistent, that is the one thing. It's like in 40K when you measure from a unit, you can measure from the front of the unit, the back of the unit, the middle of the unit, but it has to be consistent, right? There are a lot of people who do not do consistency because they want that extra inch of, measurement or whatever, so they can get that little bit of advantage. But in BattleTech, so long as everything is consistent and everything goes by a rule that is consistently applied, most people don't care. I mean, I've played in games of BattleTech where people said, one hit to the cockpit kills the pilot because seatbelts will not stop an AC-20 from like turning that guy into pulp, right? Because brissance of steel is the thing. So yeah, like as long as that is consistent, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that of all the rule mistakes we've covered, this one seems to have the most neutral impact on the game. Like it definitely changes things for sure, but it doesn't, in my opinion, break things. But I'd love to know if people are listening to this and like, oh no, it definitely breaks this. Let us know and we'll share it in the next episode. I'm really, really, really curious.
Yeah, and let me know what people say. I would be interested to hear the feedback from the community because I've farmed the community for ideas and input for so many things, from what mechs to cover next to what subjects to tackle. And I love hearing this sort of input because this helps me have a better, deeper appreciation of things that I know less about. And again, just listening is the key to learning.
Well, those are this episode's rule mistakes. So a big thank you to MechWarrior Metal Ed for submitting that. And obviously, Tex for sharing that rule mistake. I know next time I play BattleTech, I'm going to have the Terminator music playing in my head whenever I walk.
Dun, 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 dun.
Tex, I got to thank you for being in our podcast today. It was really, really, really amazing. Is there anything you'd like to say before we set you free into the ether to create your own amazing creations?
I would say, if you're out there listening, you could do 2 things that would please me. 1, every day, try to create something, whether it is a joke or a song or a piece of art, or just making somebody's life a little easier. Try to create and put some positivity in this world. And 2, take care of yourselves. It's very important. Times are fucky. The world is stressed and everyone's upset about something. But if you keep a good attitude and you work hard, I think you can accomplish anything.
Well, Tex, thank you for your great content, being here today, and your wisdom, even though you probably don't want me to call it that.
I would say thank you for sharing your fuck ups so that I won't repeat them. See, there you go. That's wisdom. You applying that would be wisdom. Me kvetching about the mistakes I make, that's just complaining. That's what I do.
Well, you're a cool guy. Thanks for coming.
Well, everyone, on to the next segment.
This is more of the sphere we live in. The first prototype KF Drive was launched from Seoul in the 22nd century, jumping from the star's zenith jump point and ending at its nadir 2 trillion meters away. Towing the vessel from dry docks near Mars out of the ecliptic to approximately 7 astronomical units above Seoul would have taken over 30 kilometers per second of impulse, plus another 10 kilometers per second to hold it at that location for the 10 days required to charge the drive. This was more than 6 times the delta V required to travel between Earth and Mars, and must have been a significant challenge for the primitive vessels of the time. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Tertiary objective, stories of the inner sphere segment. Initiating.
Harkis Spaceport, Mirage, Federated Suns, 21 October 3146. Dmitri stood at the outskirts of the spaceport, a string in his hand, letting the kite at the other end fly high. The 13-year-old boy had been doing this every day for 2 weeks now. The first couple days, security personnel had come and questioned him, but they had eventually given up. I am just a red-haired boy flying a kite, nothing more. He reassured himself, hiding his nervousness, but still smiling like the happiest kid in the whole inner sphere. A Leopard-class dropship landed on the runway close to him. 2 battlemechs departed soon after, taking up position around the dropship before they moved on. He waited for the mechs to move around a building. Then he tied the kite to the fence and uncovered the hole he had been digging under it for the last 2 days. Before slipping underneath the fence, he pressed a button and released a bunch of magnetized helium-filled balloons on the other side of the spaceport. He closed the distance to the Leopard without anyone noticing him, and if they did, who really cared about a small boy anyway? The balloons had distracted security, and for everyone else, he was just a random passenger, or the kid of some worker. A few crew members started exiting the ship with crates. Dmitri checked his visitor's badge that allowed him full access to the landing strips and casually walked behind a control station, checking his shoes. He waited for the crew to unpack a few more crates. Then, he walked behind them. He closed the distance to the dropship cargo bay and headed inside. Turning left, he ascended the stairwell, went 2 decks up to the ship's civilian quarters, and stopped in front of room 314. Casually glancing up and down the corridor, he knocked on the door, small knuckles, while pulling something out of his pocket with his other hand. The door opened, and an elderly man stared at him with a confused look.
What do you want?
Dmitri raised his needler and shot the man in the face. Then, he dropped a copy of Vordem Gazettes on the corpse and closed the door before sauntering out of the dropship. I am just a red-haired boy on his way off the dropship. He was trying to convince himself more than anyone around him. 2 hours later, Dmitri had washed off his makeup and removed the red wig, his dark skin and short dark hair showing again. In a small diner, he watched the news as the reporter announced another murder by the infamous Kafka, whose existence had become public knowledge back in 3084, when Pro Capella leaked a bunch of classified files from the Republic of the Sphere's criminal database. He looked at his friend, sitting next to him, and put on a shocked face. What the hell? His friend just shrugged. So, people die. Dmitri hid a proud smile and looked at the boy who thought he was his friend. It was nothing more than an alibi. Nothing more. I suppose you're right. The sadness in Dmitri's voice wasn't fake. Denias-class dropship, Merrill's Hope, en route to Natter Jump Point. Mirage, Federated Suns, 23 October 3146. Dmitri looked at his mother and older sister and smirked. It actually was a nice planet. His sister punched him lightly on the shoulder. You just liked your little friends. I liked Mary. The others, they were necessary to sell me as a normal boy. Normal. You're so sweet. What did you like more, your little Mary or your first kill? Neela's smile was almost frightening. Do I have to choose? The memories of Mary's hand in his, those had been moments of pure normalcy, a closeness he had never experienced in his life. With Mary, he hadn't been a trained killer. All he'd been was a small boy with no worries. She had even given him his kite for his fake birthday and painted a small heart on it, just for him. And her gift had also given him the idea for approaching his target. Retrieving the kite after the kill had been risky, but he couldn't have just left it there. Their mother stood up, clearly annoyed. We have another target. She put the note pewter with the target's data on the table. Dmitri glanced over the details and looked at his mother, shocked. You've got to be kidding me. His sister was more in control of herself. Are you bringing Scott in for this one? No, he's still following a target in the Kaplan Confederation. Even if he wasn't, bringing him in would take far too long. Contacting him alone without HPGs. No, the contract is time sensitive and we are doing it without your brother. We don't even have one of our mechs around, he interjected. Do you really think a mech would help us take out a star kernel of the Raven Alliance on their own world? This job needs to be sneaky, in and out, without being seen and before the time on the contract expires. Or do you want to challenge him to a duel under the rules of Zellbriggen? Tell me how that goes. Dmitri squirmed under his mother's intense stare. She was right, of course, but facing a clan warrior without a mech seemed dangerous. They were rarely alone, and even an unarmored elemental could ruin one's day. It was quite the change from their usual high-profile rich guy. Then again, dangerous was pretty much part of the job description. Who would even want us to kill a clan warrior? Neela asked. It can't be another clanner. Their honor forbids them to hire us. Their mother switched the note pewter to show different data. Vladimir McMillan. He runs one of the biggest software companies in the Inner Sphere, providing civilian and military-grade software to the Federated Suns. His daughter was on planet, checking in on one of their factories when the Ravens hit, and she hasn't been seen or heard from since. So revenge? Dmitri asked. It was the second most common reason someone hired Kafka, corporate takeovers being the first. It's the best paying kind of work there is. His mother switched to a third screen, showing the amount Macmillan was willing to pay. The price is doubled if the star kernel was to suffer. You think you can get the job done, Dmitri? His sister didn't seem half as shocked as he was, and she looked shocked to the core. But his mother's tone made clear what his answer had to be. Yes, I can. I'm just a small boy flying a kite. No one will notice me, will they? Give me all the information we have on Kirbyville and Star Colonel Marcus Cooper. He wasn't sure his mother bought his confidence, but at least she was playing along. I want to see your first draft of the plan when we dock with the next jump ship. He nodded, grabbed the note pewter, and left for their other room on the dropship. He didn't just want to have a first draft when they arrived. He was set on having a complete plan worked out. As the door closed behind him, he could hear Neela starting an argument with their mother, but the door shut before he could hear what it was about. I don't need to hear it. Neela isn't happy with me taking out the Star Colonel. She wants to do it herself. He couldn't exactly blame her. It was a very prestigious job, and he'd only performed alone once, on Mirage. His plan had worked perfectly, but taking out a clan warrior was something very different. Still, Mother always has a reason for the way she does things. She will have one this time too. He needed to figure out just what the reason was. If he could probably incorporate it into his plan as well. I'm just a small boy flying a kite. Danaeus-class dropship, Merrill's Hope, en route to Natter Jump Point, Mirage, Federated Suns, 25 October, 3146. 2 days into the planning stage of the kill, Dmitri had at least identified his biggest problem: lack of intel. Even without the hyperpulse generator network, not that he could remember a time when HPGs worked, but his mother kept talking about them, information was usually being passed on via jump ships and drop ships. But when the Raven Alliance had invaded Kirbyville, they clamped down on civilian traffic. They didn't completely stop it, but the flow of information had become minuscule, meaning all the information he had was outdated. He didn't know what the Ravens had changed on the planet. He didn't know if either of the 2 civilian spaceports was still functional after the invasion. There was also another problem. He couldn't predict how the clanners would react if he assassinated the target in an obvious way. Collateral damage is okay, but only if unavoidable, he reminded himself. This was something their mother had taught them from early childhood onward. Shooting the commanding officer on planet in the head with a sniper rifle, and then seeing the clanners retaliate on the planetary population was a no-go. The same was true for any other kind of kill that would clearly be seen as an assassination. I have to be subtle. Subtle was easy when you were talking about certain targets. Quite a lot of high-ranking corporate targets surrounded themselves with other people, some of which weren't vetted by their security staff. Those targets rarely made it on the news, but they often had a better cost-benefit factor. Dmitri sighed. Okay, none of this is helping me now. I need to focus. Why does Mom want me to perform alone? Then, he found it. A single photograph in a newspaper article which he had disregarded during his first and second reading of the planetary intel, because the headline didn't focus on the Raven Alliance. Orphaned kids getting new homes. Nothing mentioned Star Colonel Marcus Cooper directly, but there, on the picture, Dmitri could see him in the background, kneeling behind a bunch of kids, comforting a very small one that was crying. The article also claimed some of the orphaned kids would get a new home in the clan. Now that he had seen it, he wanted to kick himself for not seeing it earlier. But the whole scene was so uncharacteristic for a clan warrior, so he couldn't really blame himself for not noticing it immediately. He had the answer all along. Time to become an orphan. An orphan. He felt a strange sense of freedom at the idea. An orphan could choose their own path. An orphan was free of the control of their parents. Their mother. Tina Zimmerman's Home for Wayward Children. York Folk, Kirbyville. Raven Alliance. 26 November, 3146. Dmitri was getting his lunch in the mess hall of his new home and pulling his warm hoodie tighter around himself while balancing his tray of food in one hand. Kirbyville was cold, even inside buildings. The damage the Raven Alliance had caused to the capital city's power grid was not helping either. One of the articles he had read about the planet's weather conditions had called it Slushball Terra, a planet in the middle of an ice age with snow and ice storms. Neela had just called it cold as shit. After they had landed, it had taken a couple of days to find out which orphanages the Star Colonel had not yet visited. Tina Zimmerman's Home for Wayward Children was one of them. So, they'd forged the paperwork to show Dimitri's transfer there from another unvisited orphanage on the other side of the planet. The way the Star Colonel moved through the orphanages, he would probably show up in a couple days. What they had not been able to find out was why he took some kids along with him on each visit. There didn't seem to be any common denominator for all of them. Their ages ranged from 2 to 15, and the Star Colonel didn't care about gender, education, or anything else Dmitri, Neela, and their mother could find on the planetary news and other available sources. The limited time window also made it difficult to stretch the intel gathering process any longer, as there were only 4 unvisited orphanages left on the planet.
Hey, new guy.
The big kid stood before Dmitri and looked down on him.
You want to give me some of your pudding?
The boy was flanked by 2 other big kids, who all looked like giving them pudding was just something everybody wants to do. Hazing of the new kid. Instead, Dmitri opened his pudding and rammed it into the big kid's crotch. The boy dropped to his knees, and Dmitri swiftly brought his own knee up, crashing it into the other kid's face. Blood streamed out of the bully's mouth and nose, and a grown-up started yelling at them to stop and came running over. The 2 other kids who had flanked their groaning friend stepped back, and Dmitri put his tray on the closest table, waiting for the grown-up to lead him away. Shortly thereafter, Dmitri was sitting across from the head of the orphanage. The elderly woman looked less distraught than expected. She hadn't said a single word since he had entered the room 5 minutes ago, just pointed at the chair across her table, motioning him to sit down. After 5 more minutes, she finally uttered a sigh and began talking.
You broke 2 of Henry's teeth.
Dmitri kept his silence.
He will be taking pain pills for days.
Still nothing. The woman's face reddened.
That is not how we do things here. We keep order.
She grabbed under her desk and took out a stick.
Take down your pants and lean over the chair.
Dmitri didn't move. He had nothing to fear from a stick. In fact, he had faced and endured worse during his training.
I said, miss.
He finally spoke in a low, threatening voice.
You've just been told I took down a kid twice my weight and muscle mass in a matter of seconds. Do you really think trying to flog me is any kind of good idea?
Had her face started reddening before, it was now as red as a stop sign. She pushed a button for the intercom on her desk.
Send them in!
Did he hear fear in her voice? 2 orderlies appeared in the doorway and looked at him like he was a rat they wanted to squash underneath their heels. Before they could enter, Dmitri jumped to his feet and threw his chair across the room into the first orderly, still in the door. Then he grabbed the chair next to him and broke it on the headmaster's desk, showering her with broken pieces. I really hope my timing is right. He tested the weight of the 2 broken chair legs in his hands, then rushed forward and smashed one of them over the orderly's head while stopping his fist with a slash of the other one. He kicked the first orderly in the shin, fell to the ground, rolled away under his falling opponent's arms, and kicked himself up again to let loose with a flurry of blows against the second orderly, who was trying to get over his fallen comrade. The man went down, and Dmitri landed a blow on the back of his head. The first orderly was getting back up and lunged forward with an angry grunt, only for Dmitri to hit him between the eyes with his broken chair leg while sidestepping the attack.
Enough!
A deep, commanding voice said from behind him. Dmitri smiled. The voice had not been raised, but the orderly didn't dare to move, and Dmitri didn't even try to hide his smile. It was not like Star Colonel Marcus Cooper could see his face anyway. Perfect timing. He had seen the Star Colonel arrive in an armored car while he was taken to the headmaster's office, and a plan had formed in his head. Dmitri had assumed the Star Colonel would head directly to the headmaster's office, giving him a couple minutes before the man would be there. The timing of the orderly's arrival in the office had worked perfectly, giving Cooper a good look at Dmitri's fighting acumen. The clan's honored strength, and he had just shown it in the best possible way.
Seems like I have found my first recruit today.
There was a smile on the Star Colonel's lips when Dmitri turned around. Star Colonel Marcus Cooper wasn't a big man, but he wasn't small either. He was still dwarfed by the 2 elementals flanking him, even without their battle armor. Even if I could take him myself, I will never get past them. It's a good thing I'm not counting on a physical confrontation. Raven Alliance HQ, Cardamus, Kirbyville, Raven Alliance, 28 November 3146. Dmitri blocked a kick, but was still taken by surprise as a fist struck his ear. He went to the ground, shaking his head to clear the ringing. Half dazed, he blocked a foot coming down on him, and with both hands he grabbed and twisted. Hard. He heard a bone snap, and the other kid, Mina, cried in pain as she went down. He still didn't know why he was here. Exactly. But the thrice-a-day combat training felt good. It felt normal. His best guess was that Cooper sought to fill his ranks with recruits from the planet. But that didn't make any sense, given the clan's breeding program.
It doesn't matter. I need to get to him.
Dmitri figured he had 2 more chances. The only time he had seen his target since his arrival was when the Star Colonel brought in another batch of recruits, yesterday. He also came in when he brought Dmitri and 2 other kids from the orphanage. He got up and extended his hand to help Mina onto her one good foot. The short-haired girl accepted the offer, and he helped her up. The feel of her hand in his reminded him of Mary. He had to shake that thought, but it felt too good, so he let it linger for a moment. Then she put her arm on his shoulders so she could use him as a crutch while they went to the infirmary.
I am just a small boy flying a kite.
He knew he was lying to himself, but the thought helped him focus.
If the pattern is always the same, I have 2 more chances. I hope that is enough.
This has been an excerpt from Flying Kites written by Daniel Isberner. To continue the story, check out Shrapnel, the official BattleTech magazine, issue number 10. MechWarrior friends and foes alike. That brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech. And as we wrap up today's episode, I wanted to quickly honor our Patreon Loremasters in a way that is both fitting of scholars and worthy of warriors. In a haiku. Ahem. MagnumDanger roars. Retro Lazer strikes with force. Mechs fall to the ground. And that brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech. Want to reach out or support our podcast? You can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and Patreon, all linked in the description. As part of our Patreon, we offer exclusive participation opportunities and monthly draws for bespoke BungleTech prizes. In closing, I will leave you all with a few words of wisdom from our lore master Retro Lazer. 12s happen. Until next time, MechWarriors, good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.